2.6 kinda sucks. Jokes aside, the highly anticipated 2.6 patch has landed with Augusta leading the charge, both in banners and in story. TLDR, super fun character to play with some weird quirks, kind of annoying to play in Miwa because you if you think I'm gonna sit here and start counting waves, and double you because I lost 50-50 to Queso when going for S1. Still got it though. Augusta as a playable character, I'm totally cool with. Yuno's a separate issue that we'll deal with when the time comes, but for today, I just want to focus on the story. And man, I got some things to say about the story. If this is your first video of mine and you're expecting me to give some scathing review or do a double somersault puree onto Kuro's cock, then I'm sorry, you're just not gonna get that. At the end of the day, Wuwa's worst story is still bearable, and this is nowhere near Wuwa's worst. But it also doesn't really give the same feeling as Wuwa's best stories. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the positives. First of all, the overall visuals are still insane. That initial cutscene of Augusta gives us such a good taste of her character, and is such a strong way to start off the story. The set piece within the first hour where we're running after Tyranno gave me insane Monster Hunter and Indiana Jones vibes, and I loved every second of it. And I'd say this is one of the most prominent times that Kuro has used the environment in such an effective way to get you engaged and keep you on your toes. I really cannot explain how cool I found this whole segment. It felt like I was playing a completely different game. And that final fight versus Augusta against the false sovereign is absolutely stunning. Kuro once again teasing the idea of a resonator battle. There should be a new endgame mode, and this should have happened against Frolova, but whatever. And I have to say, the False Sovereign has to be my new favorite final boss Wuwa has introduced to this day. His design is so dope, and his incredibly diverse moveset makes me dread a hologram version of him. So that's a pretty good sign. And that final cutscene with Augusta, just straight Kamehamehaing the False Sovereign, was so satisfying. And arguably one of the best cutscenes they've ever dropped, even topping the one from 2.2 and 2.4. Yuno honestly stole the show with how little screen time she has. She was genuinely such a breath of fresh air compared to all the other characters we saw, and gives her character such a bouncy... she's very okay, listen. The fan service is undeniable. We know what genre we're playing, it's bound to happen. That being said, her actual personality is fun to see on screen, whether she's being rebellious and sassy or actually worried and sentimental. When making tsundere type characters, it's very easy to make them just annoying to listen to, but I think they balance Yuno very well. Augusta's relationship with the concept of strength is something that is pretty interesting. You find out she's not someone that actually cared about strength or becoming stronger, but someone who was forced to become strong to make a change that would ensure the tragedies in her life wouldn't ever occur again. Her constant struggle with whispers from the dark tide, promising her more strength while being surrounded by people that question her strength, creates a pretty interesting dilemma for her to overcome. And because of this, that power of friendship type trope we got at the end actually makes sense, because the idea of unified strength overcoming the seduction of personal strength thematically fits with the arc, and her realization that there can be more than one hero of heroes makes her story arc work really effectively. That's kinda it. That's where the positives end. Kurobots, hold on to your wallets. Oh, wait, sorry, you already gave that to Kuro, my bad. When I say Yuno shines in the story, I'm not downplaying it. I think whatever is going on with her backstory, her predicament, is far more interesting than what's happening in the story that we covered. And considering she's more of a side character in this arc, and she has probably 10% of the screen time as any other character in the story, yes, that's including Blonde Corpo over there, that's not the greatest look. She drives forward conversation in an interesting way, and she acts as a nice foil to honestly a lot of the characters in the story, providing a little spice to the conversations in the game. So you might be saying, well, what about Augusta? You just said she has a good character arc. See, Augusta does have a pretty good character arc. It's just that her character overall is a little boring. Now I get it. Augusta loves a good fight and can be pretty chill, but we don't really get that side of her throughout the story because, well, we're dealing with some pretty important shit. I get that, that's fine. The problem is, this story has a runtime of 3 hours, give or take. And Rover himself is a pretty serious guy. And the blonde dude was also a pretty serious guy. So we have a narrative that requires us to listen to 2 serious people, sometimes 3, for a runtime of 3 hours. I think it's safe to say that I could get a little stale. I'm not saying give me Marvel movie quips, that would just be annoying and stupid. But what I am saying is that everyone's personality seems to more or less fall under one category. And that just isn't something that's interesting to watch. Now, I'm not saying that she doesn't have a personality, nor is she likable. I think we see plenty of moments of her being a strong and compassionate leader and ruler. And we also get to see little glimpses of her more hidden traits throughout the flashback in Murmur Town. But we only really see one side of her character. An example of something like this being done well, in my opinion, is Cartethia. In her story quest, we saw many sides of her throughout the story that gave her more life and made it all the more entertaining to watch. When she was embarrassed or being a loser, we laughed. When she was genuinely down in the dumps, we felt for her. And when she got serious, we cheer for her. Creating these dimensions in a character only make you appreciate the character more, and those shining moments of their personality shine even brighter. Augusta doesn't really have that many moments where she isn't being the strong leader, and that makes her a little less charismatic and interesting to watch. She has one moment, that is all we got for a different side to her, and we get it for like 10 seconds? Again, I don't think this is completely to the fault of the character either. There just isn't really much for her to work with because Rover is flatter than ever in this patch. Rover, for the most part, is also a pretty serious dude. And also, Augusta is a pretty serious gal. So for the majority of the story, we have 2 serious protagonists interacting with each other. And as you might guess, it's not that entertaining. I just don't think Augusta as a character can solo carry an entire story arc. Which is why, once again, Yuno is so integral to Augusta's character. And no, I'm not talking about their kits. That's another problem, but I digress. These 2 characters have a really close relationship with each other, which I'm assuming we're gonna learn more of in the next part. Yuno also has such a stark personality from everyone around her, especially Augusta. I feel like Yuno should have been included more to act as a proper foil to Augusta's character, and give Augusta a chance to have more interesting conversation. And if it's because they want to keep Yuno content restricted to her specific part in the patch, that presents another problem. Why isn't Lupa in this patch? I've heard so many different reasons to this question. She's a gladiator, not a hunter.
She almost attacked her own teammate and would have been a hindrance in the eyes of the hunter.
She probably has to act as mainline defense. I'm sorry, these are all weak reasons. At least we get a reason as to why Cartethia isn't here. She's still doing shit over at the Black Shores, and we know that putting Cartethia in these type of situations can also be a detriment to her. She at least gets a mention in the story. But Lupa? Listen, I like Lupa a lot, but I'm putting my bias aside for this because this is bothering me on a more storytelling perspective alongside what they're doing with their characters. Wuwa has this issue of making characters irrelevant once their banner is over. You want to know the last time we saw Jeja? It was during the anniversary for like 2 seconds. If Jeja isn't important enough, that was also the last time we saw Jian. Bro, we got Calcharo and Septimont before any of the 1.0 characters that aren't Shorekeeper. The reason the Lupa thing bothers me is that she is directly tied to the Dark Tide conflict that Yuno is facing. We saw Yuno falling to the Dark Tide, and she even explains the lengths she went to avoid that fate. Augusta throughout the entire story is trying to resist the pull of the Dark Tide. Why doesn't Rover mention the character that was literally going to be taken by Leviathan and by the Dark Tide and fought back against it, who also knows information on another character that was taken by the Dark Tide? Also, the fact that Lupa isn't here because she's a gladiator, not a hunter. Brother, she shares the same qualifications as Rover with the whole champion of the Great Aegon and Arsenosis Chosen or whatever the fuck. She was just as capable of being a part of this mission, especially when it comes to skill alongside her actual role in the story. Plus, This would just add another character for Augusta to actually talk to than the flat board that Rover has been resorted to in this patch. Aside from the scene with Abby, that was kind of cute.
Sorry to hear that. But if my clever, brave, stylish, and sweet Abby could help me out, that'd be amazing.
The reason this is a huge issue is that we are in 2.6, and we barely know anything about the cast besides Kartethia and maybe Shorekeeper. Everything that we know about Shang Liao, Chang Li, Carlotta, same shit we learned when they first debuted. I have a friend who doesn't really care about any of the characters because they know that once their patch has passed, that character will not get any character interactions, any new info, any new scenes, nothing. It's such a weird decision because they're going out of their way to limiting the characters they can use in their own property while also making it harder for the players to actually care about the characters. Sure, maybe they have to drop some bucks to pay the VAs, but having those characters around is literally free advertisement for their rerun banner. I promise you, the casual player could care less if Rochia buffs the entire Havoc lineup, but they probably will care if Rochia and her suitcase had some funny lines with Abby, or if Lupa had some moments to glaze and fangirl over Augusta. Or at the very least, be someone to give Rover and Augusta some more diverse conversation. And listen, if we get Boo Ling, no offense Kiki, of all characters, I think we could fit in a character that is from the same region. But whatever, let's move on from it. Let's now talk about the part that everyone has complained about, the Murmur Town segment. I'm be honest, this isn't the most egregious thing in the world, but it does have a lot of issues. But I want to specifically talk about the writing. Yes, the writing. The thing that requires someone to put a pen to a piece of paper and decide what the characters say and do. And for whatever reason, the writer decided to litter this segment specifically with what I like to dub Dora dialogue. What do I mean by this? Well,
This is a Sonoro.
Is this a Sonoro?
All right, time for Abby's rundown. So, Rover and I were tracking that shadowy monster fella, and I followed its scent right to, this Sonoro. That little girl. Does her voice sound familiar to you?
It led us into the Sonoro. Maybe it can lead us out.
You're saying we should use it to leave the Sonoro.
All right, the Waystone.
I don't know what happened. I don't know what went wrong in the writing room, but this is abysmal. This is the laziest way to bloat out dialogue while also making the characters look stupid and making your audience feel stupid. This is the most we've seen Abby actually do something in the story, and the writer decided that Abby did not have enough personality to create actual dialogue, but instead turned him into Neo Paimon.
This is a Sonoro.
And what's worse is that Augusta literally reiterates the same line not even 10 seconds later. And then we get a rundown of what we just did 10 seconds ago. See, I get that they were explaining it to Augusta, and Augusta wasn't there when Abby mentioned it being a Sonoro. But these are lines that literally do not need to exist and are only there to pad out time. But you know what? I could see that argument not being a good example. But what about this?
It led us into the Sonoro. Maybe it can lead us out.
You're saying we should use it to leave the Sonoro, and that whatever's messing with us might be coming from outside.
Why did Rover reiterate the exact same thing Augusta said? Just a little more drawn out. And the whole segment where the audience knows that the familiar sounding girl is Augusta, but the story acts as if it's some crazy mystery, and then Abby goes, "Hey, she sounds familiar, but I can't put my finger on it. What about you, Rover?" The reason this specifically annoys me is because we literally just talked about how Abby's nose can, like, track anything. We even have a scene of him talking about tracking residual frequencies and whatnot, like in 2.4. So why is Abby, of all people, unable to link that the small girl is Augusta? Shouldn't they have the same frequency or whatever? this is a nitpick. I know it is. But my issue is that these lines were clearly half-assed, and those lines are the exact thing that made Paimon insufferable. This also leads up to the more serious issue. The presentation of this arc was pretty weak. It's not the worst thing in the world, but considering we just came off the heels of a really strong character arc that also dealt with the past of a character, this feels like a step backwards. Them embellishing this whole mystery feels so lackluster because they didn't really put any effort into making it much of a mystery. It's a classic example of telling and not showing. If I'm able to pick up the fact that the familiar sounding girl... Okay, can we talk about this? Why didn't they just make it question mark, question mark, question mark? Like, it's like they're not even trying. Is Augusta? Then don't spend the next 10 minutes being like, I wonder who this is. A mystery is only as good as the reveal. And this reveal was booty cheeks. Well, they weren't trying to make it a mystery, they made it easy to figure out for a reason. Okay, then why add it at all? Were they unable to exposit Augusta's feelings in any other way? Rover could literally just be like, wow, you were so bubbly, or something like that. And then Augusta just talks about how embarrassed she is of Rover and Abby seeing that side of her. It doesn't need to be this big thing. And am I the only one that didn't really care for Angel? I understand I'm supposed to, but I only really care because the story is telling me that Augusta cares about her. And even then, I didn't see the importance of her until the Dark Tide did its thing and hinted at Angel becoming Galbrena. Which, I'll be honest, I didn't even realize because... Okay, well, I was pretty tired when I did the story, but I was also so tuned out because, well, I didn't feel the need to actually care. I don't know what happened, but there was nothing special about Angel, whether it was the lines, the delivery, or the way she conveyed emotion. There was almost no visual emotion, so... It's as if the Kuro writer saw a notepad of generic traits for friends that care, and just translated that into their lines. At least Augusta, we had a moment where we saw, oh, she's willing to put someone ahead out of goodwill. Which, while isn't an incredibly impressive trait to write home about in these kinds of stories, it's still something. But I barely got anything from Angel. She got a cool visual though. So centering the story around Augusta's upbringing and her connection to Angel felt beyond tedious, because I would have gotten the same amount of understanding if I read Cliff's note about it. This is why presentation is so important. And no, it's not because people struggle to pay attention unless there's flashy colors. It's because the base story, whether or not it has multiple layers or not, should work to gain your attention. Take this scene from Naruto, for example. If you have never seen Naruto and this is the first scene you saw of Naruto, you can immediately tell, oh, that popsicle means something to Naruto. That character means something to Naruto. Something must have happened to that character that is making Naruto react this way. Anyone could figure that out without words. There are no words in this scene. All I know about Angel is that her parents have fucked off somewhere and that she cares about Augusta, which is fine, right? All I need to know is that she cares about Augusta. But if that's the only trait you're going to show, then you could definitely try a little harder on showing that idea. There's no way they could have fit all that in the story. Okay, then maybe they shouldn't have chosen this to be her narrative. This kind of circles back to Yuno's story being significantly more interesting as opposed to Augusta's. Honestly, I think I would have just preferred the story that we got regarding the invasion of Faviano be the main focus of that shitty event we got last patch. And in this patch, we could focus more on Augusta trying to prove herself to be capable and strong, while developing the side of her that holds resentment towards the Senate, or how Septimont used to be. Maybe create a moment of self-doubt where Augusta feels that Septimont doesn't deserve to be saved, but then she gets a chance to prevent history from repeating itself at the end and have that be one of her hype moments to re-solidify her goals or whatever. Not to say that the hype moments we got were bad, but just to show that there is room for the story and to mark off their patch checklist, which seems to be hype moments in aura. Also, like, what is the Leviathan doing? At this point, it really does feel like we're just getting Monster of the Week type stories, which I guess makes sense. We're just trying to stop Leviathan and he's just being a persistent little... But it does feel like a progression in the story is a little lacking. we're trying to get more answers from Sentinel, so we're gathering his 7 Dragon Balls or whatever. I don't know, man. Leviathan, just hurry up, scrap with me with your own fucking hands. I'm getting tired of this. Also, 2.5 might as well just have not happened.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
Yep. We didn't get a single moment of Rover thinking about Frolova's words. Listen, I don't expect him to care about her. She was a psycho. But like, she was kind of spitting facts. Rover, are you just gonna let her say that? You didn't think about what she had to say at all?
Any news from the F4, Rover? Or are we still chilling like we've been for the past few days?
Alright, whatever. I didn't have that many expectations for the storyline. Another issue is, maybe it's just me, but I feel like the pacing of the story felt a little off. Like, the gameplay to story ratio kind of felt like ass this time around. Typically it's not too bad, but the pacing felt really wonky, but that just might be me. I understand that story should take its time, and I have no argument against that. Unless it's overbloated like a certain other one. But there should be an equal amount of gameplay to match said story. But yeah, those are my overall issues with the story. With Augusta being a slightly mundane character to follow when she isn't swinging her sword around, to Rover not giving a fuck about anything other than Sentinel and what's happening along the way, to that pretty lackluster backstory for Augusta. Again, the story isn't bad. Honestly, if you just play through and shut your brain off, it's still a fun time. It just kind of feels like a regression of what they've been improving upon in their story, and it also feels like the issues in their storytelling are more prevalent in this story. That being said, I'm still looking forward to Yuno's part, and I feel like they're gonna cook with it. Like, I don't know. Yuno just seems like she's gonna have a banger story, but that's just me. I have high expectations, but I also have a feeling they won't let me down. So, overall, accents were too hard to understand, and I don't really get why Yuno died. 7 out of 10. Oh, Genocide, you ruined 7 out of 10s, bro.